Trump has signed an executive order aiming to lower U.S. drug costs. Based on what I'm reading from liberal Twitter, this is the actual end of the world. It seems like it's pretty bad. I want to know more. CNN, provide me a backdrop while I do some quick Googling.
Why doesn't somebody fight the drug price situation, meaning equalization? There's a term, it's called equalization. Nobody wants to mention that term. And I'm not knocking the drug companies. I'm really more knocking the countries than the drug companies, because
can't be mean to corporations. Don't want to establish that pattern.
They're forced to do things. But the drug lobby is the strongest lobby in this country, they say, the drug lobby. It's between that and lawyers, and they have a lot of power. But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care.
Okay, so here's the argument that Trump is presenting, basically, in this executive order. The idea is that pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money in the United States because we're the only country barbaric enough to let pharmaceutical companies charge whatever the they want to when selling to our citizens, right? So if a pharmaceutical company is selling a drug to the government or to the private market in a place like, say, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, whatever, usually there are price controls. The reason for that is because people socialistically have decided that insulin should not cost $50 billion a vial. Diabetic people shouldn't just like die for no reason, you know? I think it's fair. I think that's reasonable. But pharmaceutical companies make a ton of money over here in the States because we don't have those rules. And in addition to that, our government doesn't negotiate, not really at least, for lower prices when they buy these medications to hand them out through Medicaid or Medicare. So Big Pharma makes an obscene amount of money essentially getting subsidized by the federal government. Money goes from taxes to the federal government, and then the federal government goes, yes, we would love to spend $200 a vial on insulin so we can give it to poor diabetic people. Thank you. And then they, hand it over. It's a system. Now, what Trump is saying is that by paying high prices here in America, we are subsidizing other nations around the world. We are essentially allowing them to get these drugs for cheap. The problem with this is that it's bullshit. The idea that pharmaceutical companies could only survive if they charge exorbitant inflated prices for their drugs is just not true. There are pharmaceutical companies that operate and sell in foreign countries that have price controls on their drugs that manage to survive. The reason we pay an exorbitantly high cost for our medication over here in the States is not to fund R&D. It's to fund executive pay, stock options, stock buybacks, and other bullshit like that. There are some people concerned that what this is leading to is a reduction in R&D spending, which is, I've heard some arguments for, I've heard some arguments against, I don't really know. But that's the argument that Trump is making. Like that is the argument that he is making right here.
Countries where they paid a small fraction of what for the same drug that what we pay many, many times more for.
What does the executive order do, though? Nobody knows. We'll get to that in a second.
And we'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure.
See? This is economic populism from the right. Yeah, we were being subjected to extortionary prices from Big Pharma, but don't worry, it's not the corporation's fault. It's socialist countries' fault. Big Pharma Corp had no choice but to drive you into bankruptcy with their medicine costs. Okay, don't ever be mad at corporations.
They really felt comfortable doing, but they've gotten away with it. These countries, European Union, has been brutal. And the drug companies actually told me stories. It was just brutal how they forced them. And European Union suing all our companies, Apple, Google, Meta. They're suing all of our companies.
It's remarkable how even in an executive order that's explicitly meant to cut down on extortionary pharma prices, the real villain is government regulation. Oh yeah, the pharma companies are the victim here. The real reason this is happening is because of those evil European countries with their regulations and price controls and affordable healthcare. This is why I've always called him a faux populist, or like a faux economic populist at least, because like even the rhetoric where you would think, because I saw some people, by the way, I saw some people on social media being like, I don't know, I think he's cooking with this one because we do want lower pharma prices. But that's the thing, by definition, as a consequence of the ideology he represents, he will never do anything good on this front. He can't. They're a cult to evil. Like, don't be tricked. Don't be fooled. No matter how progressive anything they do sounds, it's never for the right reason. It's never good. You know, even the things that seem like it should be an obvious slam dunk, they're not.
They have judges that are European Union centric, and they get rewarded 15 billion, 17 billion, 20 billion, and they use that to run their operation. Not going to happen any longer, that I can tell you. So what's been happening is we've been subsidizing other countries throughout the world, not just in Europe, throughout the world. European Union was the most difficult from what I understand. I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich.
It's got to be Elon, right? It's got to be Elon. There's no way. I know it could be a lot of people, but I do think it would be funniest if it was Elon, because Elon is 100% the kind of guy who would take Ozempic because he's really self-conscious about his image, but he's still pretty fat, right? Like, he's still got that weird, like, Dr. Eggman body going on.
I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88, and in New York I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on? He said, so I checked, and it's the same box, made in the same plant, by the same company. It's the identical pill that I buy in New York. And here I'm paying $88 in London. In New York, I'm paying $1,300. Now, this is a great businessman, but he's not familiar with this crazy situation that we have. But he was stunned. But it was just one of those stories. And I brought it up with the drug companies, represented by somebody who's very, very smart, good person, too. And we argued about it for about half hour, and then.
And now he wants to make EU drugs more expensive. Yes, the explicit goal of this executive order is to force drug manufacturers to push for higher prices when they sell to the rest of the world. The potential consequences of this could be borderline genocidal. It might make some medications basically inaccessible to certain populations. That being said, that depends on whether they're successful in getting the price raises or in cutting them out of other markets. It's right. It's not really about lowering the cost of drugs in America. It's about forcing costs up elsewhere. Now, in practice, wealthy countries that have price controls on drugs, like Western Europe, or I mean, a lot of the world, to be honest, in varying forms, will always have pharmaceutical companies ready to make their version of these medicines because they are a social need, right? Like, it's not as though the United Kingdom is going to go without medicine because American pharmaceutical companies aren't producing it over there, right? A lot of these pharmaceutical companies aren't even American, right? They're based out of European countries, or China has their own pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot going on. America's not the only country in the world. So I guess the question is, like, how successful will this be in a bunch of different things, right? Raising prices abroad, lowering prices domestically. It's possible it could end up like over America, though, because it's possible that as a consequence of these artificially deflated prices domestically, a lot of American pharmaceutical companies get disincentivized from doing business here, whereas they already had a pretty sweet gig in other countries where there are price controls, yes, but at the very least, they're like well-established and stable ones that they can work around. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if this is even going to do anything because it seems like so ineffective. The way they're doing this, it seems like it's perfect for Trump. It's perfect for Trump because it sounds impressive, but it's not going to do anything, probably. So he gets to take credit for it while the logistics get gummed up. Like, he gets to take credit for writing, and well, for signing the executive order. But if nothing happens, he doesn't even have to take credit for the downfall.
Finally, he just said, because they can't justify it, he just said, look, you got me. You got me. I can no longer they've been justifying this crap for years. They said, oh, it's research and development. Well, I said, well, research and development, other countries should pay research and development too. It's for their benefit. It was just one of those things. And the other countries would set a price, and they'd meet the price, and they'd say...
I do largely think the excuse that you need that money for R&D is bullshit. My understanding is that a lot of the big breakthroughs in terms of commercially available medicine are initially financed by government research, which of course we're cutting now, so that's not going to happen anyway. It's going to happen out of, like, I don't know, Europe or whatever. But also, like, the idea that that's where all these pharmaceutical profits are going, that's just not true. That's bullshit.
If you don't meet the price, you can't sell it in our country. I said, well, then you walk away, and, you know, they'll call you back and they'll sell it in the country. But now they'll have to do that. So for the first time in many years, we'll slash the cost of prescription drugs, and we will bring fairness to America. Drug prices will come down by much more, really, if you think 59. If you think of a drug that is sometimes 10 times more expensive, it's much more than the 59%, you know, it depends on the way you want to analyze it, but in one way you could analyze it that way. But between 59 and 80, and I guess even 90%. So when I worked so hard in the first term, and if I got prices down, I remember I was the only one to ever get prices down for a full year, but I'd get them down like 2%, and I thought it was like a big deal. Well, we're getting them.
How will it reduce in the U.S.? Nobody knows. Wow, Vosh is so wrong here. Can you just, I'm asking this genuinely. I don't pretend to be an expert on everything, only on almost everything. Maybe this is a subject I'm lacking some information on. Could you tell me what I'm wrong on rather than just saying I'm wrong? That's all I ask. I'm very rarely annoyed when people, like, give me a reason, even if I disagree with the reason. It's the vague nothing, right? Like, that's the thing that gets me a little bit, you know? So I'm just asking for, like, a reason why. That's all. Like, give me something to engage with. Otherwise, all I can really do is be angry, you know? The reason I say I don't think that these companies are spending as much on R&D is because I honestly, and you forgive me for being a bit conspiratorial, I think it's cap. If you Google it, it's like, oh, these companies spend $50 quadrillion every year on R&D. I just don't think they do. I think that R&D, real R&D, is risky and not always likely to produce a profit. And I think that it's way more in line with the behavior of corporations for these pharma companies to just, like, reinvest it, use it to get, like, tax, like cuts in their tax for, like, business expenditures, or like do stock buybacks or whatever. I just do not believe they're sincerely spending that much. There's a loop between the academic administrations and pharma that means the lion's share of the money goes to admin costs and not the actual research materials. Yeah, seems like it's usually like that. Trying to find some information on that, like where their money comes from. So Merck & Co. spent $30 billion, or 50% of their revenue, on R&D in 2023. I just don't. Notably, over half of its R&D funds were dedicated to partnerships and acquisitions. See, this is the bullshit that I'm talking about. How the legally can you write that off as R&D? I bet you it's like that for a lot of these. And that's just one caveat. And then it's like, well, a lot of it went to administrative costs. What company spends billions every year in research? No, bullshit. They spend it on themselves. Stock buybacks are higher up than anywhere. They're more common than they were before. At the end of last year, the company joined the trending obesity market by spending $2.7 billion to add an injectable dual GLP-GIP receptor agonist with oral da-da-da-da-da. Additionally, towards the end of last year, Roche also bought another drug for the high price of $7.1 billion. Okay, that's not R&D. That's buying up other products. That's not R&D. That's not what research and development means. That's not what that means. That's not what that word means, or those words, I guess. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is that pharmaceutical companies do not need to make that much money to do research and development. You need a lot of government grants. You want, to an extent, at least in this system, public-private partnerships, right? You want like private companies being given an incentive to make marketable and make profitable stuff that's built on publicly funded research. But you do not need every pharmaceutical company making $50 quadrillion every year to keep providing insulin, something that we invented over a century ago.
Down.
Well, we didn't invent insulin, but you know what I mean.
60, 70, 80, 90%. but actually more than that if you think about it in the way mathematically. And Farmer has to say, we're sorry, but we'll not be able to do this any longer to these countries that have been so tough. They've been very tough, nasty.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs.
Oh yeah. See how popular economic progressivism is? Hey, Democratic consultants, see how popular it is? They have to take his name and put it in their mouth to take credit for it. Bernie's economic vision is so popular with the American working class that even the fascists have to co-opt it. It's not the first time fascists have done that.
For presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator in Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody.
You gonna ban lobbying? Nope. Oh, do we have anti-pharma economic populism? No, actually, we have a rambling speech from Trump where he says that pharma companies are the real victims and government regulations that lower the prices of their products are the reason these poor pharma companies have been forced to sell at a high price here in the States. Yeah.
Nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word.
You know what's the best part of this? You know what the best part of this is going to be, by the way? The fact that as a response, people like Chuck Schumer are going to say, like, no, actually, it was a good idea for us to pay high pharma prices. Like, they're going to give this one to Trump. They're going to essentially argue that his position is the left populist position by arguing in favor of the status quo.
Who has the courage? President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry, too. I think they gave you $100 million.
I love how every day 20 things happen that would be the end of a presidential administration at any point in American history prior to this. Any time before 2016, that statement right there, that's it. That's it. That's all it takes. Why would he even say that? Who cares? There's literally like no consequences to anything. It is a level of naked corruption that exceeds, like, I think most tin pot dictatorships, though. Not just in scale, but in terms of like brazenness, because even warlords make an effort to come across as authentic and genuine to the people because they need the public support, right? Whereas up here, they have like a multi-billion-dollar media apparatus that is effectively like mentally enslaved a third of the population, so they don't have to put any effort into not coming across as obviously corrupt.
But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very...
Again, before actually taking power, the Nazi Party in Germany was... very insistent and very deliberate on presenting itself as essentially a red-brown organization. Their argument was basically like, obviously they were very anti-Semitic, racist, supremacist, but they had like a 20-point plan for improving the conditions of the working class in Germany. A lot of their ideas were good ideas. Of course, they didn't believe in any of them, right? Fascists hate the poor because the poor are weak. Right? Fascists view the world in a socially Darwinistic way, right? If you're poor, that means that you failed in the struggle for survival, and you're like more of a drain on resources than you could have been if you'd been more successful. You're not serving the state's interests, you're not paying enough taxes, you're not strong enough, right? They hate you. And they hate you too, if you're poor, and probably also just in general. The co-opting of left-leaning messaging from fascists is as old as fascism. Mussolini's basically credited for being the like political father of fascism, at least in a modern sense, and he was literally a like militant thug for union groups before he became a fascist.
Proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people.
I want to get your reaction to the president's announcement on cutting prescription drug prices,
Sienna.
Senator.
Well, President Trump just said that he's the one that improved Obamacare, which is actually flat out wrong.
Really?
He tried over and over to repeal Obamacare when he was
That's crazy that he would lie like that. So the details of the executive order are legally unclear. I read over it before stream to see if I could get like a clearer read on what the intentions are. And unfortunately, I don't think any level of political knowledge is going to necessarily help with that. It doesn't seem very actionable. Here, bullet point it. Whoever is paying the lowest price, that's the price we're going to get. Trump is essentially saying that he is going to impose a favored nation status on the United States for pharmaceutical goods, ensuring that we match the lowest price of these drugs offered in other developed countries. Unfortunately for him, I don't think you can actually put forward most favored nation status from an executive order. And the executive order requests Congress to do that work. Let me see, where is this? The order directs U.S. Trade Rep and Secretary of Commerce to take action to ensure foreign countries are not engaged in practices that purposely and unfairly undercut market prices and drive price hikes in the United States, blah, blah, blah. Price targets to pharmaceutical manufacturers that establish that America gets the best deal. Literally one after the other. One after the other right here, man. Make sure other countries aren't unfairly undercutting market prices, comma, making sure that America gets the lowest prices in the world. Gotcha. Most favored nation price, bypassing middlemen. If drug manufacturers fail to offer most favored nation pricing, the order directs the Secretary of Health and Human Services to 1. Propose rules that impose most favored nation pricing. I don't think this can be done from Department of Health and Human Services. And 2. Take other aggressive measures to significantly reduce the cost of prescription drugs. This also means nothing because it's not specific. So I don't know. The goal here seems to be to force other developed countries to raise their medicine prices, the prices they pay for these drugs, because that will be the only way pharma companies can continue to make a profit after America is paying the same price. The problem here is that this economic shock might actually break big pharma. It doesn't work. You got to understand, if America starts paying the lowest paid price of any developed country for these drugs, that could be a cut of like 99% to some of these drug prices. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that's based. I don't think we should be paying as much as we do for drugs, not even close. But there's a difference between a well-structured government sponsored and subsidized deal to lower prices in the United States and a system that just fundamentally economically does not work. Isn't breaking big pharma a good thing? Not if you want your insulin. No. You need to intelligently incorporate or nationalize big pharma. I am a huge proponent of nationalizing big pharma, but breaking it, mate, people live off those drugs, right? Pretty important. You just can't give them a win, can you, Lamau? Do you understand what I'm saying? Listen, the reason Trump's executive order is worded the way that it is to appeal to low IQ people like you. I understand that at face value, there are things here that you might like. And listen, I'm giving credit to the idea, but no, this doesn't seem like it'll work at all. And unfortunately, the devil's in the details when it comes to government policy. It's not actually something you can vibe check your way through. You actually have to do it correctly. You have to, it has to work for it to work. So instead of paying for healthcare, he wants to get everything for almost free? Well, no, because this doesn't work. The math is off. The math is off. The math doesn't line up. If we drop prices by 99% over here, companies are either not going to sell over here or they're going to start selling it through intermediaries. People are going to have to get it sent over from other countries. We don't have the same deals in place. It just doesn't work. I don't think anything's going to happen here because I don't think this is really actionable. It seems like a messy deal that can't actually be achieved. And the reason it's structured the way that it is because it's applying Trump's low IQ, tariff-centric mentality to a complicated subject that'll come across like an easy win, at least in terms of like public support, right? This won't change the root behavior that causes drug companies and healthcare to push insane drug prices. I feel like, if anything, the biggest consequence of this is that it's actually going to make Big Pharma mad at Trump, and it's going to make the rest of the world mad at Trump, because Trump is essentially like putting a massive economic incentive on Big Pharma to raise their prices everywhere, which they're not going to be able to do. But the Swiss drug maker Roche said it will put $50 billion into manufacturing in the US over the next 5 years. Well, I hope they don't mind selling their products abroad. Is this a way to frame the pursuit of lower drug costs as a negative? No, it's a way of saying the real reason that why drug prices are high in America is because of government regulation. The poor pharma companies are just victims of it. And also to give Trump like an easy populist win without having to actually do anything. The order says within 30 days, the administration will give price targets to drug makers, quote, to bring prices for American patients in line with comparably developed nations. The order lays out actions the administration could take if drug makers don't comply voluntarily, such as rulemaking to oppose the prices. It's unclear in the short term what legal authority the administration would have to enforce the order. Yeah, you can't really do price controls via executive order. Like, it's just not really, it's not really feasible. It doesn't work. Bernie Sanders thinks it'll get thrown out in courts. Maybe, but it'll just get appealed up. And even if that happens, by the way, like, that's a win for Trump, because then Trump gets to say, I was going to lower pharma prices for everyone, but then those meddling courts decided that we can't do it. And a bunch of idiot left brown types are going to be like, yo, Trump actually was cooking with that one. That's the whole point of this. Like, that's the whole point of this executive order. Even if it doesn't go through or do anything, it'll forever serve as like a testament to Trump's sincere commitment to lowering prices for the American people, which was foiled by those meddling courts. They might even use it as a pretext to further disenfranchise courts. Not, of course, to pass this executive order, but to further the de-democratization of the United States. Yes, Trump did try this back in 2020, and it was shut down by the courts. Of course, back then he didn't, he wasn't the Führer, so. If nothing else, all we can really hope for is that this executive order makes the rest of the world hate us even more. After the executive order was announced, PHRMA President and CEO Steve Ubel said in a statement, to lower costs for Americans, we need to address the real reasons U.S. prices are higher. Foreign countries not paying their fair share and middlemen driving up prices for U.S. patients. Right. CEO of the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. I love my economic progressivism that hinges on the argument that A, pharma companies are the real victims, and B, the real issue is that people in other countries aren't paying enough. Definitely a big anti-pharma sentiment here. At the moment, that's all there really is to say. This has the potential, depending on how far they take it, to be one of the most economically and, I guess, health ruinous policies in American history. It has the potential, if enacted, if enforced, to be more of an upheaval than anything else he's ever done. I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think there's any practical way to force that. I think it's going to get thrown out in courts and it's going to stay that way. Or at the very least, like, enforcement is going to be very spotty, or they're going to find some compromise. I don't really know. But yeah, pretty crazy. Speaking of Trump's faux leftist populism, did you see him proposing higher taxes on the wealthy? No, that's pretty funny though. Why would he do that? He keeps pushing for his big, beautiful bill that includes tax cuts for the wealthy. Did his brain melt more than it had already? Trump floats raising taxes on the rich to pay for his sweeping tax and spending cuts package. Sure. You want to see me give the man some credit? Sure, there you go. Why not? Cool. He would graciously accept even a tiny tax increase on the rich. Nice, nice, nice. Trump proposed it, but then it said it probably shouldn't happen, and it was exclusive to millionaires, not billionaires. Well, yeah, he wouldn't want to, like, make the oligarchs angry. That's funny. Steve Bannon was encouraging him to do it. Makes sense. As somebody who's not in league with the oligarchs and not in close contact with the inner circle, it makes sense that Steve Bannon would have a slightly more populist attitude towards funding the deconstruction of democracy. Anyway, whatever. Points made.